Guys, so for today's reading for Gaza, we're going to be continuing the destruction of Palestine is the destruction of the earth. Last time I think we I should use this bookmark. We just read the preface. Or maybe, yeah, we just read the preface. Free Luigi. Honestly, Free Luigi, like, it's not a meme. He literally it should be a mistrial because innocent until proven guilty, and Eric Adams fucking paraded him. Oh shoot, I don't know if I can swear on here. That reminds me, so right now I am packing to college. I'm leaving tonight. I have a job in our career development office, so I'll be learning a lot of job interviewing and tips that I'll probably share with you guys. So I've had a lot of issues with banks because of when I was in the hospital, and I won't go into all that, but I'm gonna call my senator about some legislation I think would help. Pretty much, I think that banks should have to notify the county before they, ding you for being late. Because if they have the resources to call you over and over again, they can call your county. Like, I couldn't access my phone. And now my credit score went down like 200 points, and I'm working on it, but hopefully by the time I graduate, it will be back up so I can get an apartment in a good place. But yeah, I'm making a website. I love having music playing in the background when I read, but TikTok just automatically copyright claims it, even if it's my friend's song. I was watching a legal video about Taylor Swift and her getting her music rights back. If you ever want to go into music, you should be independent, because what these record labels claim and do, even if you're independent, TikTok and stuff will ban your music, and then you have to do an appeal that takes 30 days, and that's why I'm making my own website. It will just be called banditdowning.com. I don't know when it will be up. I'll keep you guys updated. But anyway, reading for Gaza. The destruction of Palestine is the destruction of the earth. That's what this chapter is called. And this was written... 6 months after the war. We have now clocked half a year of this genocide. Half a year has passed since the resistance launched Tufan al-Aqsa, and the occupation responded by declaring and executing genocide. It has been half a year, 6 months, 184 days of bombs picking off one family after another, one high-rise building after another, one residential district after another, relentlessly, methodically. Half a year of the gray bones of children poking out under the rubble. Half rows of tiny bodies in white shrouds lined up on the ground, of a mutilated girl hanging from a window as if from a meat hook. Half a year of parents bidding farewell to their children with eerie composure, as if the souls of the living had departed with the dead, or in uncontrollable spasms of grief, as if they might never again be able to put one foot in front of the other and take a step on this earth. Half a year of a dozen massacres per day, summary executions, sniping, bulldozers driving over corpses and all the rest, and it just doesn't stop. It goes on and it goes on and it doesn't stop, and then it continues and proceeds apace, and it won't come to an end, and it just doesn't stop. One can go insane with despair watching this from a distance. If one feels that way, then one should try to imagine how the survivors in Gaza feel. And again, this was written just 6 months in, and now we're seeing Israel trying to occupy the north, continuing to bulldoze. The majority report cited something, I can't remember what they cited, but doctors in Gaza are saying that the counts that we're seeing are vast undercounts, the counts of dead, because they're being very careful to only release the names of people the bodies have been found. One estimate has 300,000 dead, and I think that makes more sense if you look at the destruction in Gaza. Like, the idea that it's only 40 or 50,000 just doesn't really make sense. Also, I'm curious about what Israel did with that ceasefire proposal. I haven't looked into that yet. I might do that. I'm going to do that real quickly now. Just bear with me. In the meantime, I was just listening to Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. Really good album. Israel ceasefire. Netanyahu thwarted ceasefires? No, he would never do that. Hamas offered major concessions. So they're beginning discussions. Yep. Why have Hamas Israel ceasefire talks stalled? Because Israel doesn't want a ceasefire, they want a genocide. It's the UN. Okay, I'll keep reading. I don't get why the UN hasn't sent in peacekeeper troops yet. Like, it's insane. The first advanced late capitalist genocide. The state of Israel is now committing the worst crime known to humanity, and this particular genocide has some unique characteristics that set it apart from others on the recent record. First of all, from its outset, this genocide has been a transnational effort, coordinated and organized by the advanced capitalist countries of the West together with Israel. The US, the UK, Germany, France, and most other EU members immediately rushed to participate in the bloodshed, sending arms to the occupation as so many dishes to a banquet, flying over Gaza to share intelligence with the headquarters and pilots, rolling out the diplomatic defenses around this state, and as if that were not enough, taking the last crumbs and sustenance out of the Palestinians' hands. Now that they are starving and have only the minimal assistance from UNRWA to keep them safe, the US and UK, fuck Biden. I'm sorry, but the fact that he immediately believed, like, the whole UNRWA defunding thing was because, 20 out of thousands of people that worked there were involved in Hamas, the resistance fighting group, and then you cut off aid to all of that. This is why you can't have old, senile white men in office. Anyway, the US and the UK are cutting off the last lifeline too. One could be forgiven for thinking they want the Palestinians to die. This has been the picture during the first half year of this genocide. So far, it has been one monochrome scene of cooperation. No other genocide since the Holocaust has presented such a picture. From Bangladesh to Guatemala, Sudan to Myanmar, genocides might have been perpetrated with varying degrees of complicity from the capitalist core, but here we are dealing with something qualitatively different. A useful comparison would be the genocide of the Bosnian Muslims, an event that shaped my own political youth. With an arms embargo, the West denied that people the right to defend themselves, though their retreat from Srebrenica Through their retreat from Srebrenica, the Dutch forces knowingly handed over the town to Ratko Mladic. In the 4 years of this war, the so-called international community stood by as Bosnian Muslims were decimated, but these were primarily acts of omission. The West did not arm Republika Srpska with the best bombs from its arsenals. Bill Clinton did not fly in to hug Slobodan Milosevic. The slaughter was not accompanied by the constant refrain, the Serbian nationalists have the right to defend themselves. What we are seeing now might be the first advanced late capitalist genocide. I must confess to some naivety here. I had not expected quite this voracious an appetite for Palestinian blood. Of course, I have not been surprised by the behavior of the occupation. The second thing we said to each other in the morning of October 7th was, they will destroy Gaza, they will kill everyone. The first thing we said in these early hours consisted not so much of words, but of cries of jubilation. Those of us who have lived our lives with and through the question of Palestine could not react in any other way to the scenes of the resistance storming the era's checkpoint, this labyrinth of concrete towers and pens and surveillance systems, this consummate installation of guns and scanners and cameras, certainly the most monstrous moments to the domination of another people I have ever been inside. All of a sudden, the hands of Palestinian fighters who had overpowered the occupation soldiers and torn down their flag. How could we not scream with astonishment and joy? It was the same with the scenes of Palestinians breaking through the fence and the walls and streaming into the lands from which they had expelled, and with reports of the resistance seizing the police station in Siderat, the ethnically clean colony built on top of the village of Najid, occupied since 1948. So when people ask, do you condemn Hamas? Yes, I condemn them killing innocent civilians, especially children. But according to international law, occupied people have the right to resistance. Hamas are the resistance fighters. And when you're being occupied by a power that every citizen has to go through military conscription, it's kind of hard to tell who's a civilian there. So yes, obviously killing children is wrong. But the side that kills the most children, Israel, is in the most wrong. These were the first reactions I shared with those closest to me. But the second, immense trepidation. We all knew how the state of Israel behaves and what to expect of it. What I personally did not fully count on was the extent to which the West would throw itself into the mass killings. Clearly, I should have known better. But whatever the naivety, the events of the past half year have raised anew the question of the nature of this alliance. What exactly is it that ties the state of Israel and the rest of the West so closely together? What explains the willingness of countries like the US and the UK to collaborate in this genocide? Why does the American empire share Israel's goal of destroying Palestine? One explanation, still as popular as ever in parts of the left, is the power of the Zionist lobby. I will come back to this. So if you guys don't know the Zionist lobby, two big players are AIPAC and CUFI. AIPAC stands for American Israel Political Action Committee. Look up before you vote for someone, look up how much AIPAC money they take. A lot of Democrats do that. My representative, Angie Craig, took over like $300,000 from AIPAC, and now she's running to be senator from Minnesota. I was just at a Peggy Flanagan rally yesterday. And Peggy, she should really co-opt that. I want to get involved in... Anyway, but Peggy Flanagan is dedicated to taking no corporate money. Another big lobbyist is CUFI. I don't know what they stand for, but they are a Christian nationalist group, and they lobby for Israel because they believe in the prophecy that a third of Israelis will be killed. I don't know what the prophecy exactly is, but then it will bring about the end times and Jesus will come back. And so they kind of like Israel for their own gains and for anti-Semitic reasons, saying that like a third of Jews will go to hell. So yeah, AIPAC and CUFI are the ones you have to look out for. If you are familiar with Macklemore, he has, two songs, Heinz Hall and Heinz Hall 2, where they talk about that. Look up Palestinian artists and rappers. They talk a lot about lobbying too. But this book will talk about it too. But let's read the next section is like 6 pages. So let's read that, and then I'll probably do a live stream reading this at some point once I settle down in college. I just need to take a break from packing. It was getting too much. One component of the definition of genocide is the physical destruction in whole or in part of the targeted groups of people, and in Gaza, a central category is precisely that of physical destruction. Already in the 2 first months, Gaza was subjected to utter and complete destruction. Already before the end of December, the Wall Street Journal reported that the destruction of Gaza equaled or surpassed that of Dresden and other German cities during the Second World War. Remember, this is only 6 months in the Second World War. One of the bravest voices outside of Palestine is Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, I don't know how to pronounce that, on the territories occupied in 1967. She begins her recent report with the observation that after 5 months of military operation, Israel has destroyed Gaza, before going on to detail the complete destruction of life-sustaining infrastructure. The emblematic image is that of a house smashed into pieces and survivors frantically digging through the rubble. If they are lucky, a boy or a girl all covered in dust might be pulled from the mass of debris. The estimate now is that some 12,000 dead bodies remain to be extracted from the pulverized houses of Gaza. This figure was later revised to around 10,000. While it has never been approached the scale we are now seeing, this is not exactly the first time the Palestinians have experienced this sort of thing. The script can be found in the 1948 Plan de Lay, where Zionist forces were instructed in the art of destroying villages by setting fire to them, by blowing them up, and by planting mines in the rubble. This reminds me a lot of Mulan. I know it might seem like a big jump, but if you remember when they're singing, what do you want, a girl worth fighting for? And then the song just abruptly stops and they see that destroyed village and they come across that doll. And then if you notice, since then there's no more music because of the horror of war. And literally we have Israelis being trained in how to destroy villages. During the Nakba, which is what the expulsion, I think Nakba stands for tragedy translates to tragedy or calamity. So the Nakba is the first expulsion of Palestinians when the UN was trying to find a homeland for the Jews. During the Nakba, it was commonplace for these forces to invade a village during the night and systematically dynamite one house after another with families still inside them. A peculiarity of the Palestinian experience is that this has never come to an end. The original act of destroying the houses over the heads of their inhabitants is repeated again and again. In the village of Al-Majald in 1950, from which the people were driven into Gaza in 2024, and in between, through any number of eternal recurrences. To pick just one, Beirut in 1982, described by Elena Badar in a balcony over the Fakahini with words that could fit any other occasion. I saw piles of concrete, stone, torn clothes scattered about, shattered glass, little pieces of cotton wool, fragments of metal, buildings destroyed or leaning crazily. White dust smothered the district, and through the gray of the smoke loomed the gutted shells of blocks and the debris of houses razed to the earth. Everything there was mixed up together. Cars were upside down, papers whirling in the sky, fire and smoke, the end of the world. This is the end of the world that never ends. Fresh rubble is always poured over the Palestinians. Destruction is the constitutive experience of Palestinian life because the essence of the Zionist project is the destruction of Palestine. Yes, you can't have an ethno-state without destruction, by definition. Even in Israel proper, where I believe 20%, I don't know what percent is Palestinian, but they're treated as second-class citizens, sort of like Jim Crow here. And in the West Bank, there are roads that Palestinians can drive on and roads that Israelis can drive on. You have license plates that are flagged as Palestinian license plates so that the authorities know if you're able to drive on those roads. It's literally Jim Crow South. This time, unlike in 1948 or 1950, however, the destruction of Palestine is playing out against the backdrop of a different but related process of destruction, namely that of the planet's climate system. Climate breakdown is the process of ecosystems being physically destroyed from the Arctic to Australia. In our book, The Long Heat, Climate Politics When It's Too Late, forthcoming from Verso in 2025, Wim Cardo and I discuss in some detail how rapidly this process is now unfolding. To take but one example, the Amazon is caught up in a spiral of dieback that might end with it becoming a treeless savanna. The Amazon rainforest has been standing for 65 million years. Now, in the span of a few short decades, global warming, together with deforestation, the original form of ecological destruction, is pushing the Amazon towards the tipping point, beyond which it will cease to exist. Indeed, much recent research suggests that it is perched on that point at present. If the Amazon were to lose its forest cover, a dizzying thought, but entirely within the realm of a possible near future, it would be a different kind of Nakba. The immediate victims would, of course, be the indigenous and Afro-descendant and other people of the Amazon, some 40 million in all, who would, in the most likely scenario, see fires rip through their forest and turn it into smoke and still live through the end of the world. Sometimes this process takes on a remarkable morphological similarity to the events in Gaza, even in geographical proximity. On the night of 11 September last year, less than a month before the start of the genocide, Storm Daniel hit Libya. In the eastern city of Derna, on the shores of the Mediterranean, about 1,000 kilometers from Gaza, people were killed in their sleep. Suddenly, a force from the sky destroyed their homes on top of them. Afterwards, reports described how random furniture and body parts poked up through pulverized buildings. Corpses still litter the street, and drinkable water is in short supply. The storm has killed whole families. According to one native of the town, it was a catastrophe unlike anything we have ever seen. The residents are searching for the bodies of their loved ones by digging with their hands and simple agricultural tools. There are Palestinian first responders rushing to the scene. According to one of them, the devastation is beyond all imagination. You walk through the city and see nothing but mud, silt, and demolished houses. The smell of corpses is everywhere. Entire families have been erased from the civil registry. You see death everywhere. During this 24-hour visit, Storm Daniel dropped a load of water, around 70 times the average rainfall for September. Derna was located at the mouth of a river running through a wadi towards the sea, normally within narrow banks, if indeed it ran at all. This was desert country, but now suddenly the river rose, burst through 2 dams, and crashed into Derna. The water, sediment, debris forming a bulldozer that ripped and soared through the city in the middle of the night of 11 September, a force of such speed and violence as to drive structures and streets into the Mediterranean and turn the former town center into a brownish, muddy bog. Using today's refined methodologies of weather attribution, researchers could quickly conclude that the floods had been 50 times more likely by global warming, mathematical code for the cause of the disaster. Only this warming could have brought about the event. During the preceding summer months, the waters off North Africa had been no less than 5.5 degrees warmer than the average from the previous 2 decades, and warm water holds heat energy that can get packed into a storm like fuel into a missile. Some 11,300 people were killed in one single night by Storm Daniel in Libya. the most intense event of mass killing by climate change so far in the decade, possibly the century. These scenes formed a striking prefiguration of those that would begin to play out in Gaza 26 days later, but there are also direct connections between the places. Because rescue teams in Gaza have long been used to dealing with this kind of destruction, they moved swiftly into Derna to help out. At least a dozen Palestinians who had fled from Gaza to Derna were killed in the floods. One Palestinian, Faiz Abu Amra, told Reuters 2 catastrophes took place: the catastrophe of the displacement and the storm in Libya. The Arabic word for catastrophe here, of course, being Nakba. Yeah. So according to Faiz Abu Amra, the first Nakba was the one of 1948, which drove his family and 800,000 other Palestinians out of their homeland. His family ended up in Mukhayam Deir al-Bala, a refugee camp, and then some members moved on to get away from the Israeli wars of aggression to the town of Derna, and then came a second Nakba. Faiz Abu Amra lost several relatives in the storm. He himself survived because he had chosen to stay behind in Deir al-Bala, where mourning tents were erected for the victims. And then, just a few weeks later, came the genocide. God knows if Faiz Abu Amra is still alive. Now, as we recognize the similarities and entanglements of these processes of destruction, some significant differences also struck the eye. The forces that bombed Derna were of another nature than those bombing Gaza. The anonymous soar of death from the sky in the former case was not an air force, but the cumulative saturation of the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. No one had the specific intention to destroy Derna, as the state of Israel has had the express intention to destroy Gaza. There were no army spokesmen announcing a focus on maximum damage, no Likud MP howling, bring down buildings, bomb without distinction. When fossil fuel companies extract their goods and put them up for combustion, they do not intend to kill anyone in particular. They know, however, that these commodities will, as a matter of certainty, kill people. It might be people in Libya, or in Congo, or in Bangladesh, or in Peru. It is of no consequence to them. This is not genocide. In our book, Overshoot, How the World Surrendered to Climate Breakdown, I'm going to have to dog-ear this page. I want to add that to my list. Well, I guess I have it recorded, but... now out from Verso, Wim, and I toy with the term paupericide for what is going on here. The relentless expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure beyond all boundaries for a livable planet. The initial purpose of the act is not to kill anyone per se. The goal of extracting coal or oil gas is to make money. Once it becomes fully established that this form of money-making actually kills multitudes, however, the absence of intention begins to fill up. As a corollary of the basic insights of climate science, the knowledge is now more or less universally spread. Fossil fuels kill people, randomly, blindly, indiscriminately, with a heavy concentration on poor people in the global south, and they kill in greater numbers the longer business as usual continues. When the atmosphere is oversaturated with CO2, the lethality of any additional quantum of CO2 is high and on the rise. Mass casualties are then an ideological and mentally processed, de facto accepted result of capital accumulation. If you're doing something that hurts somebody and you know it, you're doing it on purpose, prosecutor Steve Schleicher said in his closing argument against Derek Chauvin, later convicted for the murder of George Floyd. Mutatis mutandis, the same applies here. Indeed, the violence of fossil fuel production becomes more lethal and more purposeful with every passing year. Compare this with one bombing in Mukhayam Jabalia on 25th October, which killed at least 126 civilians, including 69 children. The stated target of this act was a single Hamas commander. I remember this. I remember I was in a gallery at my college for rehearsal, and I think I left early, or I was only there for the beginning. And I remember just crying on my walk back and needing to talk to friends because it was so fucking maddening to me. I remember this specific event. Did the occupation intend to also kill the 126 civilians, or was it just callously indifferent to that kind of mass collateral damage? Intentionality and indifference here blur. So too, on the climate front, still qualitatively different from that of Palestine, perhaps the difference is diminishing. Are there any more specific moments of articulation between the destruction of Palestine and the destruction of the earth? By moments of articulation, I mean points where one process impacts and forms the other. in a reciprocating causation, a dialect of determination? My answer is yes, indeed. Such moments of articulation have linked up in a rather tight sequence for almost 2 centuries now. To demonstrate this phenomenon, I will go back to the moment when it began, 1840. The events of that year have been a perennial obsession of mine. I have touched upon them here and there, but I have yet to write a coherent account. I began doing this research 11 years ago, towards the end of my PhD, when I wrote Fossil Capital, and realized that the topic required a study of its own, a sequel to be called Fossil Empire. In recent months, I have returned again to this moment in time with a view to developing a longue durée analysis of fossil empire in Palestine. So the next section is called No, It Is in Our Power to Pulverize You. Let's see. We are about 10% of the way through the book. So I think next time I read will be a live stream. I need to go pack up some stuff. But all this talk of bulldozer reminded me. I want to know what her full name is. But the woman who was the Israelis' bulldozer, Rachel Corrie. Here's her Wikipedia page. An American nonviolence activist and diarist. Is that like a diary person? Yeah, okay. She was a member of the pro-Palestinian International Solidarity Movement and was active throughout the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. In 2003, Rachel Alien Corrie is her name. In 2003, she was in Rafah, a city in the Gaza Strip, where the Israeli military was demolishing Palestinian houses at the height of the Second Intifada. Well, and Intifada means resistance, right? Donate to Wikipedia if you're able. They're a great resource. In 2003, she was in Rafah, a city in the Gaza Strip, where the Israeli military was demolishing Palestinian houses at the height of the Second Intifada. While protesting the demolitions as they were being carried out, she was killed by an Israeli armored bulldozer that crushed her. So this is what she looked like. I remember there's a post from her, or about her, when she was 10 years old, speaking somewhere, talking about how much she wanted world peace. So yeah, always keep reading. Look up this author. You should. It's a cheap book. I think I got it for around $10. So read ahead, read along with me. Remember to stay cozy.